Hey guys, Urban Combat Survivor here. This is another one of those videos that I've been kind of dodging. It's a tough video, it's a tough subject. And, but like I said in my one video, somebody has to be the one to step up. So, I'm going to do it. Have you considered the rules of engagement that you're going to live by and those that you're with need to live by in the case of a breakdown of the rule of law? In other words, when exactly are you going to pull the trigger? How much distance are you willing to give up before you take force as your only recourse to keep yourself and your family safe? I can't give you the answer on this for you. All I can do is prompt you as best I can to think about this, to consider this, and if there are others that you're going to be working with, to talk about this. In the initial stages of a breakdown of the rule of law, this is before we know whether or not this is, it's going to be a deep breakdown if it happens, In the initial stages, your rules of engagement need to be pretty conservative. Because if there's a riot and you think, man, this is the breakdown, this is something, this is it, and you start reacting to that riot as if it were a breakdown of the rule of law, and then it isn't, it's just a riot. A riot is a breakdown of the rule of law, but it's a very temporary one. So if you think, this is it, this is the time I've been waiting for, and really it's just a riot that's going to last a few hours, of course, defend your home and your family, of course. But you have to be a lot more conservative. Because most states, if and when the rule of law is reestablished after that riot, if you were shooting people out front of your house, you're going to prison. So it's something that really needs to be considered and thought about and talked about with those you're preparing with. Because if a situation ever arises that you haven't thought about, that is when you're most likely to overreact or react emotionally in a panic. So if there's a riot and you have recently purchased a gun for survival and you really think that it's coming down, you might start shooting people that aren't coming through your front door. And that's something you need to be very aware of. Do not let yourself fall into a mindset of panic. Don't let yourself start running on emotion and instinct. Ever. Don't ever let that happen. Because when that happens, you're going to do bad things. You're going to make mistakes that you never would have made had you really considered the situation. So think about what your rules of engagement are going to be and how they are going to change and evolve through the course of time. When a breakdown first happens, you might choose, now remember, these are just examples. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not even going to suggest what your rules of engagement should be. So I'm going to give an example here and nothing more. Each of you really needs to think about this for yourselves. Decide this for you. When it first happens, you might decide, okay, I'm going to defend the actual building of my home. Nobody comes in, and that's the extent of what I'm going to do. Well, if this starts lasting longer term, you might extend this to your property. You might then extend that further to, 20 meters on past every point of your property. Until you know the extent of the breakdown of the rule of law, if and when this happens, you need to be very cautious and aware of the possibility that it's not a permanent breakdown of the rule of law, and that later on You might be held legally responsible for what you felt was just defending your own. It's something to consider. It's something to really think about and be aware of the consequences. Also, pay attention. Any basic gun safety course is going to tell you to be aware of your shot and what's beyond it. In a chaotic situation, that becomes much more difficult. That's why friendly fire in a war zone is a very real danger. Allies, even people in the same unit, shoot each other all the time. Because it's a chaotic situation. You can't control what's going on. You don't know where people are moving to. Even if you guys are communicating clearly to each other, the next guy might not have heard. He might not know. He might misunderstand, or he might know something you don't. So, not only do you need to think about what your rules of engagement need to be for safety, you need to consider the legal ramifications. Because eventually there is going to be a rule of law reestablished. Think about all of the guys in places around the world where the rule of law has broken down that were later brought to trial for things that they thought they were just defending their families. And they were later brought to trial for this. So, I understand most people are going to have the immediate reaction of, well, I got to defend mine, so yes, you have to defend yours. Because not to defend yourself and your family is the reaction of a dead man. But understand that there are likely to be longer-term consequences to these decisions. And this decision is probably more important in that regard than most others. So think about your rules of engagement, discuss it, and lock it in. If you take people in later, a lot of people might say, I'm not taking anybody in. That's easy to say until that person you haven't thought of knocks on your door. So you might wind up taking people in that you hadn't considered. If they come into the situation, you need to have clearly defined rules of engagement that you can convey to them. Hope it makes you think. And I hope it makes you really consider the seriousness of the situation if it ever does come down. Urban Combat Survivor, signing off.